Okay guys, so camera gear. Look, it's not always easy to make the right decision because, well, there's camera gear you need and camera gear you don't need. But there's also camera gear that you think you need, but you actually don't. And then there's camera gear that you don't need, but it's really fun to have, and that's usually everyone's favorite, I know. And then there are those times when you went for the cheaper version because you were like, how much of a difference can there really be between the cheap one and the more expensive one? And then it turns out that there is a big difference after all. So today I want to share my camera gear mistakes. Those times that I made the wrong decision or decided not to buy something because I thought that I wouldn't really need it as a filmmaker. And trust me, it's not just beginners who make these mistakes. We all do. And just to be clear guys, this is my personal experience. I'm not telling you to buy all these things. If anything, this video is more about keeping you from buying something. But you have to assess your own situation, you know? What kind of filmmaker are you? What kind of videos do you make? What's your style? Because it's perfectly possible that everything I don't need is the perfect setup for you. So just keep in mind that this is not a gear recommendation video. I just want to help you to make the right decision by sharing my experience and my mistakes. Let's start with the one piece of gear you can't do without, and that's the camera. Now, the problem here is that there are so many different cameras to choose from on one side, and then on the other side, so many different people and filmmakers with different camera needs. So it's normal that a lot of people make mistakes or get confused, especially when starting out. So the mistake that I made when I started to get into filmmaking and YouTube was buying a GoPro, because in my mind, size and weight was a lot more important when traveling for months on end. And my stills camera back then was already so big and heavy. Now, the thing with the GoPro is that it's a fun tool to have and it's also very useful in a lot of situations, but it's not suitable as the main camera for a filmmaker or a content creator. For a vlogger, maybe, but if you care about image quality and depth of field and you want to learn about filmmaking with different lenses, apertures, shutter speeds, color grading, then a GoPro won't get you very far. A month or two after I bought it, I already decided to buy the Canon M50. So a GoPro is great, but in most cases it's just an extra tool you should add later on for specific situations. If you want to start as a filmmaker or content creator and learn the craft, you need a camera with interchangeable lenses. That's just my opinion, and it doesn't have to be an expensive camera. The thing is, I agree that you can start making videos on your phone or on a GoPro. It doesn't really matter because story and content is a lot more important than gear. But if you want to go from making videos to filmmaking, then a GoPro is not enough. Also, a phone won't work, because you cannot learn the technical side of filmmaking on your phone or a GoPro. That's just how it is. So a GoPro is a lot of fun and it has its place in a filmmaker's toolkit, but it's not the main camera. It can't be the main camera. Even if it's just for starting out, because for the same price you can get a nice entry-level camera with interchangeable lenses that will allow you to learn everything you need to know about filmmaking as a beginner. Because, you know, no one wants to buy something that they'll stop using after 2 weeks. And that was the case for me with the GoPro. Audio quality is just as important, if not more important, than image quality, especially here on YouTube. And again, I made a mistake when I was traveling because I decided that price, size, and weight was more important than quality. So I bought this super cheap lavalier mic. And don't get me wrong, there are lavalier mics that will give you superb audio quality, just not the super cheap ones. Also, this one has a cable, and when I bought it, I was like, yeah, that won't bother me, but it does. It really does. This is not the right choice for an all-round run-and-gun microphone. Because of that cable and everything, it just doesn't work, you know what I mean? That cable is always in the way, and yeah, no. So a few months, maybe even weeks after I bought this one, I bought the Rode VideoMic Pro Plus, and that's a great all-round microphone. It's not Wait. It's not perfect and also quite expensive. I think there must be other microphones out there that will give you the same or similar audio quality for a cheaper price. but a shotgun microphone like this I think is the best option when you're starting out, because it will give you good audio quality in almost all situations. Not the best, but good enough. Now, if you're making videos in a studio and you don't leave that studio ever, then a lavalier microphone will also work, of course. But for run and gun filmmaking, going out, running around, the cable, no. It just depends on your situation. For me, the cheap lavalier mic with the cable was just like frustration. ND filters. Look, I knew that ND filters are super important for filmmaking. I learned about ND filters more than 10 years ago when I was still studying photography, but I was stubborn and I didn't buy one until I was making videos already for 6 months, maybe even longer. And that's also because when it comes to photography, I don't like to use filters because I feel like all the things that filters do, or a lot of things filters do, you can do just as well in Lightroom. So I was like, I can do without an ND filter for filmmaking. Don't tell me what to do, Peter McKinnon, trying to make me buy your super expensive ND filters. No, actually, I've heard that they're pretty good, but you get my point, right? I just felt like an ND filter would be something I would buy and then never use again. Even though I knew that they're so important for filmmaking. Okay, so if you don't have one, short explanation. In photography, you adjust exposure by adjusting ISO, aperture, and shutter speed. You could of course also use an ND filter, but usually the shutter speed is the most important setting and you can shoot in all lighting conditions by just adjusting the shutter speed. Now for video it's a little bit different because once you've set the shutter speed, you don't want to touch it again. It should stay on 1/50th or 120th of a second depending on your frame rate. The ISO, also ideally, once it's set, you don't touch. And then there's also aperture, but you want to use aperture as a creative setting, not because you have to use it because of the light. So how do you adjust exposure then? Well, with an ND filter, because an ND filter will block a certain amount of light from hitting the sensor. And that way you can shoot in bright daylight with the aperture all the way open without overexposing your footage. So if you want a shallow depth of field during the day, bright sunlight, you need an ND filter. There's almost no other way. No, there is no other way. Because changing the shutter speed is the wrong way to do it. And I always use cheap brands, guys. You can find them in the description. Now, some people have said that those cheap brands, the quality is not top-notch, and it's true, but the problem is that I tend to scratch and break filters a lot. So I feel more comfortable using a cheap one and not an expensive one. For YouTube videos, the cheap ones, well, for me at least, the quality is more than good enough. That filter for me also has to act as a lens protector. That's the problem. A drone is not something you need as a beginner filmmaker, but a lot of people think that a drone is just a gimmick, something filmmakers use but don't actually need. And I thought the same. It's also expensive, you know, but I waited for way too long to invest in a drone because now I actually have my first paid client for drone shots. So it's not a toy, it can actually make you money, and if I get a few more of these clients, then my drone will be paid for. So it's definitely something that depends on your situation, because if you're a beginner and you've just bought your first camera, then you don't need a drone. But when you're a beginner and you start getting your first clients, then it might be time to think about investing in a drone, because you also need time to learn how to fly that thing. Remember when I crashed mine only 2 days after buying? It's definitely not a good idea to buy a drone and then on the second day take it on an assignment. But yeah, you can use a drone to charge extra for assignments. With drone shots that much, without that much. Okay, so this is not really a camera gear mistake that I've made because I still love my newer stabilizer in combination with my Canon M50. But I've been using the Canon R5 now also for a few months, and the IBIS is insanely good. So honestly, I don't think that this stabilizer would improve shooting with my Canon R5. It wouldn't make it any smoother. A gimbal probably will, because a gimbal is, you know, like super surgically smooth. But yeah, a stabilizer like this, like the newer stabilizer, no, I don't think it will improve the shots on the R5. We've come at a point where the IBIS in newer cameras is so good that you almost don't need a stabilizer like this anymore. But it certainly depends on what camera you have, because in combination with my M50, I love it. So if you're thinking about buying a stabilizer like the newer stabilizer, then make sure that it will add value, that it will improve your shots, especially if you have a newer camera with good IBIS. Otherwise, again, you'll risk buying something that you won't use. And that's it, guys, a few of my camera gear mistakes. Now again, what works for me might not work for you. The gear I need might be the gear you don't need. So before you buy something, think about what you need, think about what kind of filmmaker you are, what kind of videos you make, and then make your decisions. Because no one wants to spend money on something, invest in something that they won't use. We're all different and we all have different camera needs. If you've enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching, and see you in the next one.